everyone. Welcome to Contact Lost, the Polish podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k scene both in Poland and abroad. I'm Tweak, your host, and today I have three fantastic guests with me, two of whom have never graced our podcast with their presence. So today we will be discussing a tournament that has taken place over the last weekend, about 70-man singles event, 2100 points or 2137 points to be exact, in Krakow called the Kraków Arena. And with me today to talk about it, I have three people. I'll start with introducing them. Firstly, we have Eman.
Oh, hello.
Hi, dude. Remember to unmute yourself.
Yes, I will try to.
Great. All right. The second gentleman, as I mentioned, never before a guest in our podcast, but hopefully that will change in the future. Misza.
Hello.
All right. And then the third gentleman, we had him on the podcast already. Please welcome Danny Porter.
Hey, I tell you what, I am so I love it when I hear these two just say hello. They sound so enthusiastic. I'm so happy to be here. It's great introductions.
Yeah, when you listen to the American podcasts and so on, the people always make like a funny noise or something like that. In Poland, it's just hi or something like that. But oh well, we have to live with this.
I
Anyway.
said hello twice. I tried to be cheerful.
Yeah, that's more than I expected, so that's fine. So listen, everyone. We had this tournament over the weekend, which was a fantastic event. I was there as well. It was great fun, and I asked you three to join because, well, Eman, you came in second. Misza, you came in third. I didn't manage to invite Christian, who was in the first place, because he couldn't make it today, and today, Tuesday, is the only day when I can record this. But I figured there is one more person who should be here with us. The person who went as the only person as undefeated during that tournament. That's why we have Danny in here. So I wanted you guys to tell me, firstly, something about yourself, how you got into the hobby, and what made you the players you are today. So people who come in, well, top 3 and top 10 overall, and then we can go into your games and see what affected your list building and how your games went. By the way, the list from this tournament are linked in the description, as well as the leaderboard from Tourney Keeper, so do check them out if you're looking for inspiration. So let's start with Eman. How did you get into the hobby? How long have you been playing? And yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself.
As you probably know, I am a real veteran. It is sometimes hard to tell how long I have been playing this game because I have started at the very end of the second edition. So it was long time ago, like 23 or maybe 24 years ago. So I assume there are many players that are younger than my experience of playing 40k. And I am playing on tournaments since the third edition, because it was actually the first edition with rules that enables tournament play, right? Because the second edition was too complicated. Actually, I am a big fan of all strategic and tactical games. I have started playing wargaming in Warzone and Chronopia, and then moved to 40k, and I love it.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a bit of history.
Yes.
And when you started with 40k, what was it? I mean, because in this tournament you played Tau, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Has that
correct.
always been your army, or have you dabbled into different armies as well?
Definitely not. Definitely not. My first love is Blood Angels, of course, and I fell in love with them the first time I saw the Codex Angels of Death for the second edition.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful piece of Codex with beautiful artwork and a real green dark attitude into it. So Blood Angels are my first love. I have like, I don't know, maybe 20,000 points of Blood Angels on my shelf. And the Tau are actually my second army. I have started the Tau in 4th edition when I got, like bored with always assaulting with Blood Angels.
Yeah, it gets repetitive after a while.
Yeah.
All right, really cool. So we know your story. Now, Misza, how about you?
So I started playing Warhammer. It was Fantasy Battles back in 6th edition, so it was around around 20 years ago as well, when I was 12, I think. And I played it through the Lyceum, so basically until I was an age. Then other things got in the way, so I sort of forgot about the hobby. And really, by the end of 8th edition of Warhammer 40k, I figured, hey, I could paint something, but I don't want to invest too much into it. I will just buy one model, maybe two. And like a few months later, I had a 5k points of Blood Angels army, and just went from there. When I started playing with my friends, I started playing in a local club. I was playing with Space Marines. After Space Marines, I fell in love with Grey Knights. It was the old Grey Knights, not this edition, which are frankly quite boring for me, but the old Grey Knights, which was super dynamic, super fragile, glass cannonish, strong shooting army, which the style that does not exist anymore in the new codex. From Grey Knights, I moved on to Sisters. I really like Sisters. Again, fragile, fast, tricky codex. But again, Sisters fell out of grace. So I was looking for some new army. I figured Elder will be really strong when they come out. So I should start gathering some Craftworld Elder forces. But someone was selling Harlequins army, and I figured, hey, they are supposed to be combined in new codex. Maybe I'll buy some Harlequin forces, and as soon as Elder hits, I will be able to supplement them. So the codex came out, and turns out that Harlequins are insanely OP, and I can have some fun with them until they get nerfed.
What a coincidence.
Right? So I figured I have a good excuse because I played Harlequins in the last tournament before the codex dropped. So I can claim ignorance and say, hey, I didn't know. I always love Harlequins. So I'm planning to use this excuse a lot. I also, by complete accident, had 10 boats. So when the codex dropped, I just bought extra free from all this. I had it around Warsaw, buying from the local shops all the boats they had. So I mean, just free, but by coincidence, it was all that was left in the free shops that I visited. And here you go. I have a tournament army, which is quite decent.
Quite decent.
It's nice to play.
Yeah,
with, not against.
Yeah. So just to be clear, because I never mentioned that when I did the introduction. So Misza played Harlequins, Eman played Tau, and Christian, whom we didn't manage to bring to the podcast, won the entire thing with Harlequins as well. So just I needed to do that sort of justice to him. Now, Danny, something about you. So you played GSC in this tournament. Is that your main army? Is that the only army you've ever played?
I mean, I'm not quite sure. I've got an underdog story like Mihal has, as playing Harleys and loving Harleys. But no, I mean, we discussed this, didn't we, in January when I came on here to talk about Gene Stealers. I started with a lot of armies, but I never took any extra to a tournament. I've only ever taken Gene Stealers. I started end of beginning of 2020. I took Gene Stealers when it was 8th edition to a really bad RTT came last. And then COVID hit, we had lockdowns. So I then cycled through different armies, but I never actually took them to a tournament until last year when we started up again. And this is where I am, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, because yeah, as I said, your performance at the tournament was stellar. no matter what placing it was. But we'll get there. We'll get there in a moment. So right, I think we can start by discussing what you brought and what or how the armies performed. So how your games looked like. And I'll start with Danny. Can you tell us, because your list was mentioned, I don't know if our listeners also listen to Frontline Gaming. I assume yes. So on Frontline Gaming, I always, when we have a tournament in Poland, I send them our stats and I send them the details of the tournament, and they pick their favorite to win the entire thing. So last Thursday, when they were doing the Thursday show, they picked your list as the one that is going to win the tournament. This didn't happen exactly, but you were undefeated. So tell us, what did you bring, and what changes have you made to the list to adjust to the current meta?
Okay, so we can start by yeah. So I changed when we last spoke. I was talking a lot about how bringing things like impassioned, industrial affinity, and myriad cults is probably the way to go, and that was really great. Was working out fantastically until they dropped Tau. And the problem with Tau is everybody brings AFPs, which just unfortunately, when you've got a 5-up armor save, your toughness 3 or toughness 4 1-win bodies just sort of melt. So I went back to the drawing board and I thought, right, well, what can we do that we can try and counter this issue? And I thought, instead of going for all-out offense, we can maybe try and shift the codex a little bit and go for something a little bit more defensive focused. Because as we can see right now, the armies that win are the ones that just spam 4+ invulnerables. So that's Tau, Custodes, Harlequins, even Tyrannies to a certain extent. And the thing with that is that really takes a lot of output out of your opponent's army, if you can, especially if you can swing this dice roll quite hot during your game. So I thought, well, actually, if I bring something that I can throw on a 5-up invulnerable save, a 5-up Film of Pain, then suddenly I'm playing into that trick as well. But I'm also bringing a bit more longevity in an army that doesn't naturally have it. So I've been thinking for a while now, I really love Aberrants. When the Codex first came out, I thought actually they're really bad. They're really expensive for what they have. However, after playtesting some stuff and rethinking, I thought, yeah, why don't we just try 30 Aberrants with a 5-up invulnerable and a 5-up Film of Pain and see how that works into all this AFP spam. And ultimately as well, it does really well into Custodes because it's all flat 3 damage and -1 damage on a damage 2 platform. It is really good. So I tried that. It worked out really well in my last few tournaments. I think I haven't lost in a month and a half. So in tournaments. So yeah, I built around this. I started out a list with 30 Aberrants, a pile of character support to make them better, some acolytes and some bikes, mostly for doing objectives, as well as a bit more of a frontline pressure, some gene stealers to be able to go turn 1 and try and charge and tie up things up, and then some ridge runners. And everyone's asking me, why are you taking ridge runners when you can take more neophytes? But ultimately, the issue that gene stealers have is we give away too many secondaries. So it's really, if you take 30 Aberrants, that's 90 wounds. You add in your acolytes that you need, your 10 gene stealers, you're looking at 150 points if everything dies. If you then add in another 10 neophytes, 20 neophytes, 30 neophytes, you're reducing the amount your opponent has to kill to score maximum 15. So I thought actually that's not really valid. Plus neophytes are really CP hungry. So I decided, you know what, I'll try and add in some ridge runners. And then everyone's like, why are you not running mind analyzers? And I'm like, flat 3 damage at strength 6 is really good. You throw in, I think it was did I add a spotter? I think it was a spotter auger, which removes the penalty for all cover, which of course in WTC terrains are full of it. And that allows them to hit against most armies on a 3 with the blip. And yeah, it's quite a lot of support in fire. Plus it also takes focus away from either your Aberrants, or they shoot your Aberrants and they're not killing your ridge runners. Because obviously you need a lot more firepower to kill them than they do to kill neophytes. So after quite a lot of different games and losing 20-0 to Misza and all these other things, I decided to quietly to change my list quite a lot over the last few weeks, and this is where I've come.
Yeah, it sounds like a ton of thinking has gone into that. So yeah, congrats, because the
you.
results show that it was worth it, and it's really well thought through. Now, Eman, how about your list? Tell us what you brought. What was the reasoning behind it? Have you been tweaking your list the same way as Danny has been, or have you been playing this from the very beginning?
So I have bring Farsight friends to the tournament. As far as I know, it is pretty, or maybe not a pretty standard, but standard list with a tweak. So it's basically 2 commanders, 1 in crisis suit, one in enforcer, 2 patrols, of course, 3 crisis squads, 2 identical with 5 crisis, each armed with 2 plasma guns and cyclic ion blaster, and 1 5 crisis suit with 2 AFPs each and a flamer. So this is like a backbone of the army. And in addition to this, I have 2 squads of Croods, 2 small squads of Crude Hounds for the objective, of course, 1 squad of Breachers in a Devilfish, small squad of stealth suits for objective play and calling 1 crisis suits out of the reserves. And on top of that, 2 broadsides in 1 unit, right? So this is like a small tweak to the pretty standard list. Actually, my list evolved through 3 local tournaments which we have in Krakow. I have started with broadside heavy list with custom sept, right? The sept which enables you to move almost everything before the battle and giving missiles weapons, ignoring all cover. It plays pretty well on a tournament which uses less terrain than WTC. Then on the second tournament, I have used Tau Sept list, also pretty standard with Shadow Sun, with Long Strike, still before the FAQ. So rather cheaty list with bodyguards hiding behind the wall to protect the Long Strike. But this list seems to have too many rerolls. I was playing pretty slow with all those rerolls given by the Shadow Sun and all their special rules. So I was not able to finish all of my games, right? Then on the pre-arena tournament, I have used actual Farsight to try it because I have never played with Farsight. And this list went was actually pretty good, but Farsight, it seems it's not shooting enough. It fights well in close combat.
Ironically.
Yes, exactly. He fights pretty well in close combat, but it's not shooting enough. So to the arena, I have decided to move through the Farsight friends with only 1 close combat commander in an enforcer battle suit, and the second one all shooty and tanky commander in crisis suit with Bagel, hunting plate, iridium, battle suit, and so on. So 1+ save, 4+ invulnerable save, and 5+ ignoring wounds. And I guess this list performs pretty well.
Yeah, sounds like there was no coincidence in your army choices and unit choices. So well done. Misza, how about your choices?
Are you asking me how did I come up with this groundbreaking idea of bringing Night Void Weavers?
Well, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it took a genius, to be honest. No, I mean, I will not talk about Void Weavers because they were obvious choice. You talked with Typhus, we talked with Vlad, so I think that no one is surprised about 9 Void Weavers if you want to max out your Harlequins list. I can tell you why I chose Light and the other points in the list. So my list was light Seleth. I had a quite standard troop master, Shadow Seer with the light relic, which increased the range of the aura. I had Solitaire, quite standard, Night Boats, 4 units of troops with full loadout, without so all melee weapons and 2 fusions each, and 2 Death Jesters, one with this ridiculous shooting of 6s explode to 3 additional hits, and one roll changes to a 6, so 4 shots, 4 hits minimum. A second Death Jester, which turn off ops, Overwatch, and -2 to movement. And 9 Void Weavers, obviously. So I started playing with Harleys and I started testing Dark, which seemed, at least according to experts like Typhus, and I would be fool not to trust Typhus and Harlequins as a stronger choice. But after some testing, I found out that players just don't do any damage. I tested units of 10, I tested units of 5, and they hit like wet noodles. Without Troop Master, Aura to roll all wounds, the damage is just not there. They have damage from strats. They can do up to 6 mortals in melee, and up to 6 mortals in charge. But the charge does not affect vehicles or monsters, which there's plenty of those in the current meta. And in melee, there need to be like 10 of them, which means they cannot fit in the boat. So I couldn't rely on players, and with the testing, I saw how insane the damage from the Void Weavers is. So I figured it's better to max out on what the list is good at instead of trying to add some fun tricks with dying on death. Especially since you cannot use strats when fighting on death. So there is really no damage in it. Attacks with strength 3 just don't bother anyone in this meta. Nor Tau, nor Custodes.
All right, I have a question, and that is, I'm looking at your list right now, and I see that there are 2 Skyweavers in that list. Did they do anything for you, or was that just a points filler?
So I started testing without them, but I was able to basically go through any list that I encountered except Tau. Tau, I played twice, and I lost 20-0 both times. First one was absolutely my fault, because I was testing how much Harleys can take, and I just moved forward to an open and got shot out. So I figured, okay, they cannot take the Tau shooting, even in dense cover. So in theory, Tau hitting on 5s. And then the second time, I was playing Pumbaa, who started and was able to basically again destroy my list with his ignoring -1 to hit crisis suits and other Tau fun stuff. So I started to build my list to be able to answer that, and bikes were part of it. First of all, as a cheap unit to screen out stealth suits, so he cannot drop his crisis bomb near me. Because crisis suits allow you to do an action. You set them up 9 from your opponent's deployment. If you go first, you chain using drones the unit of crisis suits up to your deployment to get a good angle, and then kill a unit of voids, for example. 10-1. So if I put bikes, if I can redeploy bikes 9 inches from stealth suits, they cannot do it, and I did it in my last game. In other games, they were cheap unit to throw in front to score my secondary. They were useful. They didn't do much, but I was okay with them, kind of. They're a first thing to be gone from the list if I have to reduce to 2K.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. But okay, we'll get to the nitty-gritty of it in a moment, because I wanted us to talk about the games anyway. So to keep it short, I guess we'll focus on the highlights of those games. So let's start with Danny. Tell us about your first game. What happened there? I guess you were playing Kramer with his Harlequins, so a tough matchup at the very beginning.
Mhm.
We know what the final result was because I spoiled it, but still, how did the game go? And yeah, tell us all about it.
So I have a bit of a tradition that every time in a tournament I play um, on Vital Intelligence. It's always against either elves or Harlequins. Elves being Drukari, Harlequins, or Crefworld. So obviously, the first game was against Harleys on Vital Intelligence. So this was actually a really difficult game. To be fair, they were all really difficult games, but on Vital Intelligence with Harleys, when your list really doesn't have a lot of obsec, is quite punishing, I would say. But fortunately, he managed to go first. Rather than telling you what the actual highlights are, I'll just tell you briefly what the game plan is for people listening on how to deal with Harleys. So my game plan going into this mission is deny primary points because that's really important, especially when he's going to be denying my primary points. I'm going to make sure I can return the favor. With the amount of mobility that I do have with the deep strikes, I'm being able to deep strike on 3d6 with one squad of vibrants. Bikes are really fast. I have quite a lot of mobility. So he went first, which was really good. He managed to push his bikes obviously onto some objectives. And the problem with that is it really led him open to a very quick counterattack on my first turn. So he didn't put it on every objective. What he did was his one half essentially was out of 6 objectives, he had 3. And this allowed me then to sort of use my fast units on the left-hand side, which was empty, like my bikes. I just put my bikes onto an objective behind what they call crates, not crates, yeah, crates essentially. So he couldn't shoot me. If he had to shoot me, he had to come at a really awkward angle. And this is, I think, one of the most beneficial things about WTC is the terrain allows you to do this and force your opponent into chokehold points that they necessarily do not want to be into. And this is what this list is built around, being able to do that. And I've done this in every single game. So yeah, so the entire strategy for me on this game against Harleys was to put things onto objectives, but in such awkward angles that he has to come closer or into a really undesirable place to shoot me, because especially 9 Void Weavers, that is where the most of his damage is, as Misha's told you. And so yeah, so all I did is I moved my units behind objectives, behind terrain, wait for him to react, see what he does in his next turn, and then absolutely launch a counter strike towards him. And essentially, the way to win this matchup, I think, is to just touch as many Void Weavers. You don't have to kill them, but if you touch as many Void Weavers as possible, then they aren't going to shoot you, or they aren't going to do much damage at all. So that is essentially what I did. Is I used my aberrants to touch and string along across as many Void Weavers. I would then put them in such a way onto certain objectives that if he deployed and got out with his troops from his Star Weavers, he couldn't get onto objectives. So objective A, touch the Void Weavers. Objective B, charge and kill the Star Weavers to then get at his troops later on. The other objective was then to sort of try and bait the Solitaire as much as possible. And what I tend to do is leave the Abominant around to protect my characters. As soon as he sends the Solitaire to launch towards my characters, he's going to then counter charge, because he's not really going to, unless he pops a no invuln, he's not really going to kill my Abominant because he's very tanky. But because of his relic, it does allow him to do a lot of damage back. So basically, that's my sort of counterattack, and just try and bait that Solitaire out as soon as possible. So, for example, I threw away my Primus once my bikers had done their single mind obsession. I let my Primus come out so we could try and take it and kill him. Other than that, I used my Ridge Runners in very key positions that again forced his Void Weavers to come to shoot them. So that means in my first turn, I didn't really get to shoot them. But he then had to come and, yeah, as soon as he positioned them so he could shoot them, I then charged them with my aberrants, and I just got a lot of board control and a lot of space by doing a lot of these charges and touching units.
So you make it sound, sorry, you make it sound like this was I don't want to say one-sided, but like very much to your favor. And then when I look at the results, it was what, 11-9 or something like that. It sounds
So,
very draw-ish. So what happened there?
it's a very drawish matchup. That was very drawish. The other Harley's game was a lot way more in my favor. But with this game, the problem is I give up a lot of secondary points. So he has assassinate, he has no prisoners already. He can take a lot of damage. He can give me a lot of damage into my units. He can kill characters so easily because they do not get a save. And so I've got to be very careful about where the solitaire is at all points, where the troop master is at all points, and just these two characters can come and rinse my entire backfield. Not just that, but eventually over time, the Void Weavers do damage and they do hurt. And he did have bikes as well, and I needed to deal with bikes because I had Ridge Runners. So that was one extra turn of not being able to deal with Void Weavers. So whilst I got more on primary because I didn't let him get any primary points, he actually got more on secondaries than me. And he was very cagey with how he positioned his Void Weavers, so I wasn't actually able to kill them. I was able to charge them and touch them, but this is sort of what was happening every turn. And the reason I did this as well is so he couldn't advance. So his light allows you to advance and shoot, so it gives them a lot of mobility. But if you touch them, they can't fall back and advance. So that was another key reason why I had to touch them. But killing the Void Weavers when they've got a lot of invulnerable saves and they've got a lot of dice, I tried and I did, and I just couldn't get through them. So instead I had to change up my play and instead use my aberrants to just try and hold the objectives and just force him to fall back constantly, which meant that I didn't really kill as many as I wanted to. So my secondaries were a lot worse than his.
All right. Sounds very intense. So, but again, you pulled off a win in the end. So that's the most important part. Now, Eman, your first game.
So my first game was also against the Clowns, and it was also a hard game, right? Like all games against Clowns are nowadays. But actually, the player Adrian, which is very nice guy, and we talk a lot, was not as experienced as Misza. And he actually enables me to do what Misza told not to allow scouts to do, right? So basically, I have a position my broadsides and one squad of the crisis on the left flank, while I have put stealth suits 9 inches from his deployment zone near one squad of the Void Weavers, right? And he repositioned. He actually at the end didn't reposition any of his units, but he think of it a very long time. And basically, I was able to drop my crisis bomb against one unit of Void Weavers, right? So of course the key to this game was me actually beginning it, and I believe this is the key with Tau against the Clowns. So of course we didn't finish all the turns because, as I said, we have actually talked a lot and joke a lot, and then it didn't give us enough time to play the full 5 rounds. So in the end, I have won like 12-8, not a big victory. If we would play 5 rounds, I would probably lost. But I was also reckless when I spotted that the time is almost up. I have made many reckless decisions that enables me to score many points, but cost me a lot of units. But it was like a conscious decision, because I knew that the time is almost up. So very fun game, very intense game. It went into my favor.
Right, and it was 12-8.
12-8. 12-8 against the least with 13 bolts.
Yeah, so a good score still. I mean, against Harlequins, any sort of win is a good win.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Misza, your first game.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that I will be the villain in this podcast. So I was definitely the villain in my first game. I was the one playing Harleys. So before the tournament, I was supposed to play versus Blaine. We had a challenge, but Blaine decided to be a ref, and I ended up without opponents. So I asked him for, does anyone want to pre-game challenge? Wojtek wrote to me that yeah, he would like to, but he warned me that, by the way, I play Drukari, so I always feel uneasy about challenging others. And I said no problem, I play Harlequins. And he was, oh, okay. Yeah, and the game I started, Harlequins with the speed they have and light, so 22 inches movement, they can get the angles. I was able to shoot with 2 units of Void Weavers, 3 units of Void Weavers on 2 flanks. I killed his squad first turn. I killed the raider with grotesques. I did some wounds to other units of grotesques. He couldn't really respond yet because he's with 1 unit of Void Weavers, I was able to fire and fade. The second unit of Void Weavers was in an awkward position for him to charge. If he tried, I would fall back 6 inches and he probably would fail. So he just repositioned to be able to charge next turn. And so I got more angles. I was, even in my second turn, I was even more in the middle of the table. Again, I shot him. I did some damage, not critical yet, although quite significant, without losing practically a wound. His second turn, he tried to do some damage. He exploded. So charges from units of Incubi, from Draza, and then the second part of how balanced Void Weavers are. They are not only just super fast. They are not only super shooty, but 5 Incubi and Draza just bounced off them. He did like 3 wounds. And at this point, my third turn, I basically
the grass,
him.
basically.
Yeah. So yeah, I felt a bit dirty after this game. I don't know what else to say.
I mean, that's the reason you brought the Harlequins to the tournament,
perfectly
right?
balanced, yes.
Imagine a world where Drazar just bounces off a unit.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
insane.
Fighting twice as well, right?
So it was due to your invulnerable saves and a lot of rerolls, or they just unable to hit you?
I mean, mix of both. I probably rolled over the average with my saves, plus then rerolls, which are insane. The fact that Drazar has only 5 attacks in one activation, so I think he missed 2 first time, which is kind of statistical because he hits on freeze, no rerolls. Then he wounded with all 3, but I wasn't able to save them. Then the second turn he also missed with 2. He again whiffed with 1 on the wound roll, rolling 1 to 2, and or 1 to 1, I don't remember. And I saved them both. So only 1 attack from Incubi went through ultimately with damage free. Yeah, that wasn't the other unit of Incubi managed to kill another boat, which I didn't use any rolls on. So, but it was transport boat. Yeah.
Sad Incubi noises.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, that was the whole reason why you brought the Harlequins in the first place. So I don't even understand why you felt bad afterwards. That was the whole point.
I didn't thought it will be that bad. Because those balls died. I was tabled by Tau twice, so I saw it happen. I always believed that Drukari also have the critical damage to do it. I was really very cautious with my play until I saw that.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you have a very strong army and a skilled pilot. That's basically what it is. Anyway, moving on. Danny, your second game. Who, what secondaries did you pick?
My second game was against Eman, who's also on this podcast. So this will be a We
Go
might
on.
have two different very opinions on this. So yeah, Tau. Second game is with Eman's Tau. Obviously, the obvious choices is not to the last with this because if crisis spike and you don't make your invulnerable saves on this mission, especially with the terrain, the way the terrain was set, that I would lose a lot of points. So I believe I went R&D, I went Strangle, I think, or no, I went Brood Swarm because it was, I think I went Brood Swarm because it was Crisis, and I went with no prisoners. So we had a fun. I went first, and yeah, in my list I put in a couple of extra bikes with grenade launchers and a buggy with a flamer, just for the town matchup to see if I can kill the drones in the screen, and then lovely demo charges at strength 8 with the +1 damage can then start melting through crisis. So I moved. I had turn 1. I moved up. My strategy was simple: push up with everything and hope that I manage to just touch as many crisis as possible. Only one can fall back and shoot. They can't shoot through drones in combat. So if I touch them correctly and force him to limit what he can shoot, then I can start pushing waves and waves and waves and just essentially take the board and push him back. So I got rid of his screens. I blew up, I think, 2 crisis in my shooting with my ridge runners. I killed his drones. My aberrants charged, and in the entire game of moving forward and charging with 30 aberrants, I didn't kill a single crisis after that. So it was an interesting game. Credit where credit is due is worth. Eman did the right strategy in moving backwards and just plinking off wounds from aberrants. I think he made one mistake that if he hadn't, he would have won the game substantially. And I think that was around turn 4 where he moved back one more time. If he'd have just gone forward in turn 4 and flew over my crisis, and he flew his crisis off my aberrants and gone for every objective because it was a sticky objective mission, he would have won, and there wasn't anything I could do with it. It was just impossible for me to get through all them four ups, and I really whiffed a lot trying to kill them crisis. But yeah, the game plan was just to touch the crisis, which I continuously did, keep my objectives by stringing back aberrants and hiding acolytes, forcing his AFPs to have to target my crisis. My aberrants, otherwise they would then obviously next turn charge and keep charging and taking the ground. So that was my strategy in that.
Eman, did that strategy take you by surprise?
No, actually not. But by seeing the 30 aberrants and of course listening to the podcast, to actually your podcast and the podcast of Polish representation, I knew that Danny will bring the anti-Tau tailored list, right? so I knew that the 30
I haven't heard the Polish one, so I'm not quite sure what they've said or what secrets they're giving out, but that doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, they said that, you know, that you tried with different list, and after the Tau entered the meta, some players, including you, tried with those 30 aberrants with 5+ invulnerable save and 5+ ignoring wounds, and this is actually playing well against Tau, which proved right. So it was not a surprise for me, but of course I have maybe chosen a little bit wrongly the secondaries, because I chose to the last. I chose assassination, and I choose this weird Tau quarters, and I, of course, as Danny said, scored the maximum points to the last, because he was unable to kill any single squad of crisis. I scored only 9 on assassination, and it was two Danny. It was 2 models that were left in Danny's army on the board after we finished the game. Right, 2 heroes left.
Yes, it was fun. Yeah, essentially because he took assassination, all I could do is push all of my characters to the back corner. And again, like I said, with the Harlequins, if I touch you, you can't fall back in advance. So his Mont car really didn't come in massive effect because every crisis was either in his back corner. If they come close, I'll charge them so they can't, even if I don't kill him or I don't do any damage, he still can't get to my characters. And I think that was the pivotal moment, was where in turn 4 he had a crisis squad that could maybe try and go for them, and he wasn't able to. And I think that's what won the game.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've learned from you, actually, Danny, when playing against GSC, not to take assassination, because it's actually very difficult to score. It's like this false friend, like taking Abhor the Witch against Thousand Suns with Terminator bricks. You take Abhor the Witch, you think you're going to get a lot, and you get almost none, just because they are so resilient. It seems to, well, very similar with your list or with your army and assassination.
I think in 4 games, I think 4 people took assassination and no one scored more than 10.
Exactly.
So it's very much a bait, and like I say, if you play the army in such a way that you force your opponent to not be able to get to them, then it's a really good. It works out really well, because that is the issue with Gene Stealers, is that you need a lot of characters and they are very squishy. But with the right play and smart movement, then you can actually really not allow your opponent to get there. And if they do, they're giving up something else that you can then, as long as you recognize that they're giving up something else elsewhere, such as whether it's board presence or if it's they're making themselves weaker in another area, and you facilitate on top of that, you take advantage, then it falls in more in your favor, I think.
Right.
But I get actually a moral victory against Danny's characters, because I actually killed 2 of them in the close combat with Crisis Suit. And one of the characters killed was actually Abominant.
You killed more characters in combat with your Crisis. You killed more aberrants with your Crisis, and my aberrants killed your Crisis. So that was a weird game.
Yeah, we need to move on to fit all the games into or as many games as possible into the podcast. So, Misza, your next game against another oppressive army in the meta right now. So, Adeptus Custodes. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I will try to be brief. Turns out that Harlequin boats are really good, and on top of that, they have really good profile into Custodes bikes, because Shuriken Cannon is strength 6, -1, but -2 in -3 if I roll a 6 to wound, and the Void Prism is strength 12, so wounding on 2s. You can transfer only 1 unit. I did a quick math. Shooting from my army, which is 84 Shuriken Cannon shots, 2 Death Jesters, including 1 shooty one, and 18 shots from Fire Prisms, on average kill 9 bikes in 1 turn. So my opponents really have no game into me. What I did wrong in this game, because it was 15-5, my biggest mistake was taking assassination, thinking, getting arrogant at this point, thinking I'll just table him. And he played really well with stealing some of my objectives over the game, and keeping his bodyguards in a way I couldn't get to them with any Void Weaver balls. So his characters were safe from shooting. And again, my army does not have melee. Solitaire and Troop Master cannot kill his characters, nor his bodyguard. So when they tried, they just bounced off and died. So he kept 15 from. I got 0 from assassination. He was able to get some from primary, but it was a very one-sided game.
Yeah. So finally, an army to bringing into Custodes domination. Let's see how Tau did against Custodes. Eman, you also played against Custodes this round, right?
Yes, I have played against the Custodes in round 3, and as similar to Misza, it was very one-sided game. I have won 20-0, and that actually I have tabled him in turn 3. I started the game. I was able to bring the crisis bomb in turn 1, and you know they just start coming at me. I was shooting at them. They charged at me. I was shooting at them, and then they just left without any models left on the board.
So is this what this matchup generally looks like, or was this particular game?
Well, the player Kamil is experienced player, but his primary army, as far as I know, is Space Wolves, and he was playing only the 4th game with the Custodies. So he told me that, and in my opinion, he was not using his defensive buffs correctly on correct units. So I was able to bait him to use his defensive buffs, transhuman, and deny the rerolls on some insignificant unit, and then just destroy the significant ones. So I assume that against the more experienced Custodes player, it will be not so an easy matchup.
So Danny, your turn. In your next game, I think you played the new kids on the block. So Eldari, how did that go?
Actually, it was a 15-5, but it was pretty brutal for me. Kraftwolves are a really bad matchup, and the reason why they're a really bad matchup is because Kraftwolves are very good at killing one unit per turn. They can throw everything into one unit and they will absolutely kill it. So that means one aberrant squad per turn is going to die, because Doom is, they'll cast it bare minimum 10. Even with my deny from anyone on the board, I'm never going to deny 10. You know, with all the extra 6s and things like that, they get guaranteed charges and things like that. So it's quite difficult to kill them. However, he did what I always advise not to do. He had a lot of characters, so I decided to go with assassination. I found that, yeah, it was probably pivotal that if I keep my units sort of out of line of sight and back a little bit, he's gonna have to be aggressive, so he's gonna have to bring his characters out. So I can use that then to springboard things like my Gene Stealers that can go really fast to try and touch them and kill them. Plus, I put my Sanctus into Deep Strike so I could try and get a little bit of chip wounds off the characters. So essentially, my play in this matchup was to be really patient, force him to come forward with all of his Deep Strike, hope I survive the initial burst from the Striking Scorpions, and then countercharge him with everything that I've got out of line of sight. So that's what I did. I put 10 aberrants in the middle. I used my bikes. Well, I didn't use my bikes actually. He got turn 1 and my bikes got destroyed by 3 Night Spinners, which was really fun. But I used my Ridge Runners to kill as many scatter bikes as possible. So once he only had 2 units left, I hid everything behind terrain. I let him have the board for 1 turn, forced him to come towards me, which he did with all of his melee, and then I countercharged with 3 squads of aberrants basically. And I lost an aberrant squad 2 Striking Scorpions, but that was good because then my Gene Stealers could come and kill them. And once the Striking Scorpions, both squads were gone, as were his scatter bikes. It was just essentially use his Wraith Lords to just spring charge up the board. So I charge from one objective with 1 squad of aberrants to, you know, kill a Wraith Lord, use the extra movement from the charge to tag the next one. Once you kill one, you can then obviously consolidate and pile in towards the next one. And essentially over the next 3 turns, I had 20 aberrants that were just slowly moving up the board using charges to get that extra distance. And then because I managed to survive that initial onslaught by killing with the Striking Scorpions and killing them back, the game was unfortunately won. And I just touched all of his Night Spinners so they can shoot me, and yeah, I ended up winning 15-5. However, if he had managed to kill like 2 squads of aberrants with his Striking Scorpions and I didn't kill them back, there wasn't much I could do. It's just one of them matchups. It's a really bad one for me.
Yeah, but you totally don't make it sound like one.
All I can say with a list like this is if you're really good with how to move and know where to go and your target selection priority is all right, you can do really well. But I think this is where maybe a lot of people fall short, especially with craft worlds. They see things like night spinners and like, right, I've got to kill them first. I've got to kill them first. And they ignore the important things like the scatter bikes or the striking scorpions. So instead, I've had this game against Duda a couple of times. I've had this game against others. I changed my strategy up and I focused on killing what is actually going to wipe me rather than and just take the night spinners as long as possible before I could get to them with charges, etc.
Okay, so thanks for that insight. Misza, your third game against yet another oppressive army in the meta, the Crusher Stampede. How did that go?
Yeah, so I was terrified of this game. Crusher Stampede is one of these armies that can actually deal with Harlequins and quite decisively. Typhus proved it in the Netherlands. He won 20-0 with Harlequins with his Crusher Stampede. And I was playing versus opponent who was first at this point at the tournament. He won 2 games, 20-0. Plus, I had very bad memories with playing Crusher Stampede. I had 3 games into it, twice with sisters, once with old Harlequins colleagues, and both times I was stabled 10-2 or 3. So I had this very bad notion of playing with Crusher Stampede, and it grew to something bigger in my head than it actually is. So we set up. I set up very defensively, trying to be beyond 30 inches from Hive Guard. So with Shadow Seer, I was out of range. And I knew that he has 1 unit can actually wipe 2 units of Void Weavers in one turn, which is the Flyrant, who can turn off advance. He is like a truck. I don't know his profile exactly. I know he can do critical damage to my list. After which I would not be able to do enough damage to recover, and I would be tabled eventually by turn 3 probably. So I set up in a way that he was kind of baited to charge 2 units of Void Weavers, but I have the strat to move 6 inches with 1 unit of bikes, with 1 unit that was charged. So I knew that I will move towards the High Tyrant to block his charge into 2nd unit of Void Weavers. What Tomek did, he won the first turn, but instead of moving this 32 inches with Flight Rounds, he moved with Harpy and charged me with Harpy and moved his Flyrant back into his deployment behind the ruin. And the other Harpy went to the objective to the right in the middle of the table. So the Harpy did not do enough damage, obviously. It does not ignore advance. It did some damage to the boat. So I was able to move the boats to when he charged them to block the. I think he was trying to touch 2 units, so I could fall back and shoot with only 1 of them. I was managed to block it, so I could then fall back and shoot with 1 of those units. So I had all 3 units operational. And so that was his first mistake, that he did not charge with the Flyrant. The second mistake was that he hid him behind the ruin, but the way that the wing was visible. So I focused him down with my voids. I killed the Harpies and did some damage to Swarmlord. And basically that was the game. So after that, he charged me with Dimacron. He bounced out from the voids, obviously.
Obviously.
He charged me. I mean, I think that's the story of the tournament. Things are just bouncing off the Void Weavers. His Swarmlord charged the Skyweaver, which he killed, but then my next 10 troops killed him. On my first turn, I also moved up Skyweaver transports with Troopmaster and Solitaire. So the next, I mean, Solitaire was not in the transport, he was just next to them. He cannot go into transport, just to make it clear. But my second turn, I was able to do charges into both his units of Hive Guards with those 2 characters, which killed some, tagged the rest, and that was basically the game.
Yeah, which brings us to the end of day 1. So everyone had played 3 games, and at this point, if I remember correctly, we had in the top 7 6 Harlequins and 1 Chaos Knights. I think this is what the tournament looked like after the first day.
So definitely there were all 7 Harlequin players in top 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then something happened. So the second day came, and I guess all the Harlequin armies had to face each other or something, because the final leaderboard looked a little bit different. Still, since we were talking about Stampede, Eman, I'll have you talk about pretty much playing the same list, the same opponent. How did you do?
Yes, I was also playing Tomasz at the start of the second day. I actually deploy pretty aggressively because I wanted to start the game and shoot some hive guard and maybe one of the monsters creatures. But unfortunately, I didn't start the game. I used my redeployment to bring back the start suit from near his deployment zone. But unfortunately, one squad of the Crisis, this with AFPs, stayed very close. So he started the game. He moved. He didn't make the same mistake twice as with Misza. So he moved his fly run as far as he could, which is really frightening because he started in his deployment zone and ends at the very end of my deployment zone, and was able to charge the crisis suits which were hiding in the corner of the board.
Yeah, Stampede can do that.
Yes, it was quite scary. So all 2 units of hive guards shoots at my crisis suits with AFPs. They were able to. They actually shoot them 3 times, and were able to reduce them to only 1 member. The Flyrant was able to kill all my drones and also 2 crisis suits from the second squad. But fortunately for me, I was able to heroically intervene and with the Krutz and was able to pin him in place. So basically, it was that sentence for him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he stayed in one place, was shot to pieces into my first turn. I of course bring the crisis bomb, unfortunately, into my deployment zone. In the first turn, I was also able to kill the Dima with the combination of breachers and commander and devilfish. So basically, I also didn't make the same mistake as with playing against Danny. So I have pushed to his deployment zone as soon as possible. So starting turn 2. By the end of turn 3, I was able to kill every single monstrous creature except the Tarvigon, which was hiding in his deployment zone. And basically by the end of the turn 5, I was able to kill every single Tyrannid on the board. I was a little bit lucky in at the end of the game because the last squad of hive guards shoot at my crisis suits without drones. He managed to hit 10 times, wounds 10 times, and I've saved 8 out of 10.
Ouch.
And then because those crises was under influence of Sense of Stone, I was able to ignore half of the wounds caused by those 2.
I'm getting PTSD flashbacks from our game now.
Yes, so by the end of turn 5, I have cleared the table, but it was very, very hard and intense game, very friendly game, of course, and I was able to win it, but only by the smallest of margins. So I have won 11-9.
Yeah, your description of the game sounded like it was more one-sided, but the score doesn't reflect that very much.
Yes, because he was able to score a lot of points by the primary, due to the fact that he also pushed to my deployment zone at the beginning of the game.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Fine. Danny, your fourth game was against, I would say, quite a surprising opponent. So it was against Dark Angels, and not a typical Dark Angels list that you would expect. It was Grzelich with his crazy speeder list. How did that go?
Yeah, up until this point, I was just thinking about listening to these two talkers at how they tabled all their opponents every game. I was thinking, that's really nice to play into. But my opponent was Grzelich. So I played against Grzelich quite a few times now. And he plays Dark Angels. It's a very cool list. It's a very annoying list. It's Dark Angels and it's purely speeders with melters. So I think it's something like 32 melter shots in the army, and they all have a 5-up invulnerable if they move. They can have a 4-up invulnerable if they advance, and there's a lot of mobility and there's a lot of threat saturation in that army. And on the however, they are all vehicles. They are all 6 wounds each, so it's perfect for aberrants who've got damage 3. So throughout this entire game, it's a very swingy thing. Does he do more damage to me with his melters, or can I get into combat and start killing as many speeders as possible? And on his first turn, he blew up all my bikes. He blew up quite a lot of 1 unit of aberrants, which then led me to fail morale. Which, by the way, I failed morale on aberrants every single game. So that is one limitation with this list, I'll tell you that. Leadership 7 is not cool. But yeah, he killed quite a lot of aberrants. I think he killed 5 out of one squad, because the terrain was not in my favor, I would say. It wasn't really good terrain for this kind of mission. So I didn't have a lot of places to hide. There was a big L on the back of my deployment, but that's not an ideal place to sit. So there wasn't really anywhere where I could go. And he had 2 flyers that deal the mortal wounds. You know, it's D3 shots, and it's 3 mortal wounds if they wound you on a strength 12. So I had that to deal with, and it was quite a brutal turn from him. However, he went really aggressive, and this is a really big mistake from his end, because he had there was a lot of vehicles right near my deployment, and it allowed me in my turn 1 to charge a lot of aberrants up the field quite aggressively. So 20 aberrants charged speeders in either flank, which then allowed me to take objectives off him. I had to use all my ridge runners, unfortunately, to kill his planes, as well as using smites and everything little that I can do, whether it's the Primus pistol and things like that, just to try and kill as many as possible, which I managed to kill. I think I got 1 down to 1. No, I killed 1 and got 1 down pretty low, and then the next turn I killed it. But what it allowed me to do, because of this aggressive play, is get a really big edge on my mobility, my movement, and kill quite a few speeders that put his melter shots, of course, back on the back burner. Then I managed to use my pure strains to tie up some more of his speeders, because again, they can fall back and shoot with 1 unit. So I used my pure strains to move forward, because he was so close clumped together that I killed one speeder and then touched quite a few other squads, so he could only fall back, which meant and shoot with 1 squad, which meant that there was a lot less shooting against me next turn. And because of this momentum, I then just started moving up the board, and aberrants just smashed speeders left, right, and center. And yeah, unfortunately, it was just quite a substantial win for me towards the end at 16-4, I think.
Yeah, it does sound like a theme now when you talk about your games. You basically move your aberrants up close, you charge, and then you climb a ladder of units by just, catching them into combat and not releasing them.
Yeah, this is exactly how it plays out. It's not about killing your opponent, because they're still aberrants. Yeah, they have a lot of attacks, but it's most of your damage and your oppressiveness is in 3 squads, and one of them is always going to start in deep strike, usually because you need that extra space at the board towards the back end. So a lot of it is using a movement charges to get across the board, touch as many units as possible, and then once they've fallen back, then start picking out units that you can charge and kill, and then again use the the extra movement that you get to wrap the next 1 or 2 units and sort of really frustrate your opponent in that way and not let them shoot you or fight you. And that's the only way I see this sort of surviving, because yeah, the toughness 5, -1 damage, 3 wounds, 5 up invulnerable, 5 up feel no pain, but enough shots will put them down. And I've seen that. I have lost most of them in most games, so you've got to be really clever, I think, with how you move and approach the game.
Yeah, that's my conclusion as well. All right, moving on, just to fit as many as possible. Misza, how did your mirror game against Gogi go?
It was a fast one because we took a split. We really didn't want to, but I think we had both the same idea. The one that will push forward first will lose. So let's take defensive secondaries. He wrote down his. I was still thinking about mine. I almost went for offensive one, but then I went, hold on, let me rethink it. And I went with To the Last, Quarters, and I think Banners. Another third one that very similar to his. He also had To the Last. He also had Banners, and no, we both had Bring It Down. Anyway, with the same armies and the same secondaries, we figured this game has absolutely 0 sense. It will be 10-10 split anyway. So let's just rest and be before the final game.
So out of sheer curiosity, do you think starting means a lot in a mirror matchup like this one, or not really?
It might be swingy because the one that will go second might explode in the last turn to steal more objectives and get edge on secondary this way. On the other hand, from the light perspective, so having better mobility, in theory, I could get some angles turn 1 if I went first and try to commit 2 units of voids to kill one of his. But there's the thing, you need 2 units of voids to kill one unit. So it would be basically trade 1 for 1 with slight edge for the one who starts trading. But then the characters would fall into the equation and it will be just a bloodbath. And it will be basically on dice who will come out on top of this. So yeah, I think that going second would have slight advantage, but not a big one.
Okay, then we might as well go and just conclude with your final game. It was against Druzik, I think. So Tau, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, so this one was tough. Going to the game, I thought I'm fighting for the first place. So I was really tensed. And also being tabled twice by Tau, I thought I learned my lesson. So first thing was blocking his dirty trick with deep striking turn 1. And also the lesson I learned from my previous games was that Tau is too tough even for my shooting. I just cannot kill the crisis suits even with my profiles, which seem really good. So I knew I have to play the mission. I need to deny his secondaries. He does not have much OPSEC. And so how the game went? My opponent went first. Since I blocked his, I had to redeploy to make sure that even if he drops his crisis suits, he cannot get an angle to shoot my boats. So he didn't. He basically put his OPSEC on objectives and didn't do much else. He didn't shoot. He stayed in his behind his ruins in his deployment. So my turn 1, I moved up the board, but not too much. Still afraid of his deep strike and just trying to clear as many objectives as I could from the trashy units he had. His turn 2, he still didn't respond. He still didn't explode on me with the damage. He still was playing very cagey. So my turn 2, I basically, since I moved up my boat with and my solitaire to the middle of the table, I was able to explode, but not with Void Weavers like I did in the previous games. I did it with troops. So I charged all his crisis suits either through the wall or charged a unit next to them and just tagged them. In effect, all he could shoot his turn was the units that were in melee, or nothing because it was through the wall. And basically he couldn't recover after that. He was clearing what was touching him. More stuff started to touch him, and he just couldn't score primary or secondaries for that matter, which was Stranglehold and I forgot what was the second one. I wasn't too big on my secondaries either because I wanted psychic interrogation, which I could score only 3 times because I was out of range. He was keeping his characters very much in the back of his deployment zone. And I couldn't score much on no prisoners because I couldn't kill his suits. Even charging Solitaire and Troopmaster into his commander who allows fallback and shoot, which was plan number 1, did not went well because I couldn't kill him. As I said, Harlequins do not hit hard in melee. So the game ended with him having no primary points, but also not killing much and still having almost all his crisis suits. I think I killed only 1 unit of crisis. Beyond that, he had still 2 units of bodyguards, both commanders. No, so 1 commander he lost, and a few units of crisis. So yeah, playing objective, playing the mission.
And it ended with something like 17-3, I think.
Yeah, it was 17-3.
Yeah. All right. Very nice. Okay, Eman, your final game against the army that had the biggest presence on the tournament. So Necrons. How
Yes.
does Tau play into Necrons?
Yes, that's correct. So it was the game against Seraph. Seraph is our local Kraków player, and we played a lot, but not against Tau, right? We played a lot against my Blood Angels, and that was always like a very even game, going sometimes to my favor and sometimes to Seraph. But against the Tau, it's completely different story. I have deployed aggressively to be able to get as much as possible points for scoring primary. He actually deployed defensively, and after he rolled he rolled better for the starting of the game, and he actually won that roll. He made the biggest mistake of this game because he didn't went all in, right? He should have moved all of his units and try to do as much damage as possible to my army, which was, as I said, deployed aggressively. Instead, he moved only 1 unit of his bikes to shoot some recruits. He moved forward with his with his 2 close combat units of Rights, but that was all. The rest of his army he kept hidden in his deployment zone. So basically, I have destroyed him piece by piece. I have destroyed the first wave, then moved forward. Then he moved with his heavy destroyers and another unit of bikes, tried to shoot my crisis suits. I made some smart saves and basically took the shooting from bikes on the crisis to have my drones available when the heavy guns will fire. So I only lost like 1 or 2 crisis suits against them. Then I destroy his second wave, and like by the end of turn 2, he decided that he had enough, and he won't be able to score almost anything, and he gave up. So it was like a very quick game with almost all of his army destroyed by turn 2.
Yeah, and you could hear the lamentation of his robot women. Wow. Okay. So that was a short one. Danny, how about yours? You played another Harlequin army, I guess.
Yeah, I had a really easy run in the entire tournament with 2 Harlequins, a Craft Worlds, a Tau, and then a Melter Spam Dark Angels. So yeah, so mine was Craft Worlds on the Scarran, which was quite a. There's 2 maps that I never want to play Harlequins on. One is Vital Intelligence, and then one is the Scarran because there's no pre-game moves. So that really limits what I can do in terms of my game plan. The guy he's a really nice player, and he was excited for the game, which was really, yeah, it's very nice to see. However, he made 2 really big mistakes, which lost him the game, unfortunately. So I decided to take a more. So after my first game with Harlequins, I thought, right, I've taken the wrong secondaries, which is why I scored 11-9 because I just couldn't get enough. One of the mistakes was trying to bring it down instead of assassination, because Harlequins want to be in your face with their characters and try and do as much damage with them, I find. So if you take 2 Smash Troop Masters and a Solitaire, then you can do quite a lot of damage with them, and so of course they want to be in your face. With my army, it's purely almost melee, so it's an easy 10 points for me because I'm going to kill them. So he made 2 mistakes, right? The first mistake was he picked 2 secondaries that required to be in my deployment zone, which was a really big mistake because I have units that can just sit there, and if I know that that's his game plan, I don't have to be on the front foot and push all the way forward. I can just be patient and just deny him these points. Basically, he hasn't got a lot of units to trade with. So if I can kill some of these units and force him to have to limit how much he can score, then I will. So yeah, so I went first. So and I had no pre-game move. So what I had to do was basically I sat 2 squads of aberrants behind terrain. One was in the middle as a bit of a bait because I had that objective. He isn't going to take it with troops. So he needs to commit and try and kill my Void Weavers. Try and kill my aberrants with his Void Weavers. I also had a unit of bikes behind a big L, so he couldn't shoot them without coming all the way forward, because he couldn't charge them with troops either the way he deployed. So he had to come towards them with the Void Weavers, which meant that he had to really overextend, which brought them a lot closer to my other aberrants. And then I had a squad of aberrants on the right-hand side, which again, behind crates, he has to come to me to shoot them to a really unfavorable position. So I basically threw out a lot of bait for him to try and take. And I took Stranglehold as well. So I was comfy just sitting there, having 3 objectives and not going too far. Unfortunately, he did take the bait. And what he did was, in my turn 1, I just hid. In his turn 1, he pulled all 9 of his Void Weavers close to me to shoot me. He also brought his Shadow Seer out from its protection behind a big L right into the open behind these boats, and quite obviously he thought that that would make it safe. And I expected this, and what I did was I put a Sanctus into Deep Strike rather than leaving him on the board, because I wanted that Shadow Seer to come out, expose herself, and then I'll explain what I did. But yeah, he had 9 Void Weavers all in the open, all trying to shoot my aberrants, and I only gave him 1 squad of aberrants to shoot, but only 1 of them was on the terrain. So once he killed one, I'm going to pull that away. So 6 of the Void Weavers didn't really do much. He also sent his Solitaire to the aberrants and the crates, and I expected this. I left the Abominant behind a big L, which was within charging distance, move and charging distance of these aberrants when the Solitaire comes. And he massively overestimated the Solitaire's ability to kill 30 wounds of -1 damage, 5 up invulnerable, 5 up feel no pain. So he charged the Solitaire and he killed maybe 4 aberrants with that, and some shooting for some troops, and from a Star Weaver that would shot as well with their melters and all that. And then what I did, and because he brought forward and he was so aggressive, it allowed me to outflank him from behind with 30 aberrants, use my Gene Stealers to get around him and touch as many Void Weavers as possible. But it also allowed my Sanctus to jump behind with Neophytes, create an exposed position, and use a stratagem to turn off all auras. So what he did was he put up a feel no pain aura on his shadow set to give everything a feel no pain. Obviously -1 to wound and -6 inches to range. And my Sanctus just popped up, shot him, did a mortal wound. So automatically I can use a strat. I beat his leadership on 3 dice and turned off all auras, which then allowed all of my Ridge Runners to just unleash hell with their flat 3 damage. At this point, I'm giving exposed with my Sanctus, so they're now wounding on 2s because they're all strength 6. I'm ignoring the dense cover, so he's giving a -1 to hitting on 4s. At this point, I then also deep striked 10 aberrants behind with a 3d6 charge, but I positioned it so that he miraculously had Void Weavers in the middle, Void Weavers on the right, and a Star Weaver on the left to be charged. Of course, one of them is going to move 6 inches, but I've still got an 8-inch charge into 2 other targets on a 3d6. So essentially, on his second turn, he lost. On my second turn, sorry, he lost his shadow. He lost his Death Jester, of course, because he was in the middle in one of the Star Weavers, so he could shoot to my. Oh, so another thing I did was I positioned acolytes behind a little ruin that essentially gave offset to my bikes. So even if he got troops on there somehow, I still had offset because there was acolytes behind the ruin. And another reason why I did this is because I wanted to pull out some more of his boats, especially the Death Jester, out of hiding, so I could then slap him back in my next turn. And he took all this bait, and yeah, I think in that turn he lost his Death Jester, he lost 10 troops, his Shadow Seer, he lost 2 boats, he lost his Solitaire, and he lost 7 Void Weavers all in one turn because he took the bait, pushed everything into the middle, and I just slapped him back really hardly. I also used things like my bikes to charge and touch the other 7 the other 3 Void Weavers that were on the left that were trying to take the objective, and the troop Star Weaver, so they couldn't advance and get into my characters because that as well. And basically it was game over from there on. There was no way he could win that game. There was no way he could play it back. Next turn, I would have tabled him absolutely.
All right. So basically, it sounds like an intense game, but yet another one where you weren't able to score something like 20-0. I think if I remember correctly, we discussed this at some point during the tournament that GSC isn't just able to pull this off. Is that correct?
The problem is GSC gives up too many secondaries for your opponents. You're either going to give up a lot for bring it down, or you're going to give up a lot for no prisoners. So already they're guaranteed almost 15 on something like that. But as well as a lot of armies right now do not give up a lot of secondaries themselves. Look at Harlequins, they Custodes, they don't really give up anything themselves. So it's hard to get a 20-0 there. Harlequins, you can take bring it down, but you're gonna not many people are able to kill that many Void Weavers. Tau, yeah, you can take no prisoners, but like I proved with Eman, sometimes the dice aren't in your favor and you can't kill enough to max it out. So a lot of armies are hard to get max secondaries into, but GSC are really easy to give them up. So it's really hard to get the 20-0s.
Okay.
I can get the 5 wins, absolutely, but I can't get the 20-0s, and that's what cost me, I think, the tournament.
Fair enough. Okay, guys, I want to bring it to a close because it's been very informative, but also like time intensive. Still, I won't let you go without asking the 2 questions that I have left. One is, what are your ambitions for the future? Do you intend to keep playing with the armies that you've played here, or do you want to change something? And is there anything specifically that you want to achieve this season, for example? Eman, I'll start with you.
So the first question, if I want to change something, definitely. I do foresee that with the upcoming new codex of Tyranids and then both Knight codexes, the Tau will need to move towards the more broadsides. So maybe I will lose 1 unit of Crisis to put more broadsides into the list. But we will see. For the the closed future, I will definitely try to do something with the AFP crisis, because they were the poorest performance in my whole army, actually. And as for the tournament's goal for this year, I will try to attend them. Maybe even some tournaments outside of Kraków and the near area of Kraków.
Okay, sounds good. Misza, same questions to you. So any changes to the army, and to what's your ambition for this season?
I mean, I think that this army will be gone soon as a list, because they need to do something with followers, especially after what happened in States. So yeah, Adepticon. So probably changes will be necessary. The problem with Harlequins is that Voidweavers are the only source of damage in the army. So if they cut out this piece, the army will struggle. I think I will move to Craftworlds or come back to Sisters and be an underdog in the meta. We'll see. Yeah, I'll still be joining tournaments. There is a team tournament in Warsaw coming in June. So yeah, I'll be around.
Okay. Danny?
Yeah, I'm not going to change army, obviously.
Mm.
And I will obviously keep going, playing different tournaments. So there's not really much I can say to this one, to be honest with you. I'll just keep going to tournaments, trying to rank, get as high as possible in Poland, and honestly just drive this army up its win percentages in the global meta, to be honest.
Do you think the army has the WTC potential?
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? Originally, I built this army to tackle Custodians and Tyranids, because everybody's playing them at the minute. And unfortunately, I didn't manage to go and beat them or play against them. However, I did manage to get a win against armies that I didn't think I could. Not because I counted them, but mostly because using what the army has to sort of, I would say I outplayed most of them games. Eman was probably the hardest game I would say I had, but the other four, there was definitely a lot of outplay potential that I put in, and I managed to do that with an underdog army. So I think, yeah, depending on what Tyranids comes out, I think there's definitely play to be able to counter these sort of monster vehicle armies with Aberrants or other things that I've got in the codex, and I've got a few other lists that I've not tested or tried out yet that I think are going to do really well. So we'll see what happens with the meta. It all depends on Chaos Space Marines and Knights, I think, because I'll definitely have play into Knights with Aberrants, you know, with all the flat free damage and reroll wounds against vehicles and stuff. So I think so.
So we'll see. Okay, great. Last question, very last question that I always like to ask the top players at tournaments. Guys, do you have any piece of advice for people who want to do better in tournaments, like myself, for example? Eman, I'll start with you.
I don't know if I am the best person to ask such question.
Well, you came second.
Yeah, so maybe a trivial one. You know, you just need to practice.
Need the reps, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Misza, anything from you?
Yeah, 13 boats do work really well. Harlequins, yeah, try that. Beyond that, practice, analyze your games, ask your opponent what you could do better. But first, just don't leave your games like without a thought. After your game, sit, think what went well, what didn't. Very often during the game, you don't see it. Think hard about it. Think what you could have done differently. I often find games, even if I table my opponent, I try to think about what he could have done to change it. And after a day, I figure, okay, so he could do A, B, C, D to change the outcome. So yeah, do that.
Yeah, have a proper think after the game. That's a good piece of advice. Danny, same question to you, and we'll wrap the episode.
Yeah, so what I've noticed, not just in Poland, but obviously I played in a lot of TTS tournaments in the US and the UK, is as codexes are coming out and they're getting more stronger, people are moving away from playing the mission and start playing into the power of their codexes. And the reason why I've been winning a lot recently is because my army can't do that. They have to play the mission. And a lot of opponents don't. They focus more on playing into trying to table their opponent, and they're ignoring the primary, or they're thinking less about the primary, more about the power. My advice is to don't do that. Focus primarily on the mission. Focus on only killing the units first that counter the strength of your army. So, for example, my armies are always infantry, so I focus on removing anti-infantry stuff, and then just playing the mission. And if people did that more, I think they would win more and they would start improving as a player rather than seeing red and thinking, oh, I'm going to table my opponent because my arm is so strong. For me, that is exactly where a lot of people are going wrong.
Okay, again, a sound piece of advice, so thanks for that. Guys, I'll bring the episode to a close. So thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks a lot for this ride, and thanks a lot for all the insight that you've provided us with. Hopefully, some our listeners will take or learn something from you and from your stories. So thanks a lot, and I wish you all the best for the future.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Now-
thank you very much.
And with that, I guess it is until next time. Bye, everyone.